liminal spaces thing, it's kind of getting ruined a bit. Have you noticed? I don't know. Like there was this craze, I don't know, 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Where people were posting liminal spaces everywhere, whatever, like Instagram and Twitter. But it sort of went from liminal spaces to just empty spaces.
Yeah.
So it's like the whole kind of liminality aspect kind of seemed to get lost.
I think a lot of people that hopped on board didn't know what liminality is. You know, so they were just like, it just means weird empty spaces, right?
Yeah, creepy empty spaces.
I'm not familiar at all with that project. Can you explain it a little bit?
The Backrooms or liminal?
Yeah, well, the liminal spaces and that kind of thing, the Backrooms.
So liminal space. Someone posted an image. I think it was on 4chan ages ago, or it was either Reddit or 4chan. I think it was 4chan, and it was just like a really eerie. It was like a building, like an office building, completely empty, and it had a sort of tone to it there was something wrong about it. You just looked at it, and I agree. When I look at that original picture, I'm like, ooh, yeah, there's just something a bit off about it. It doesn't feel. It's like it does feel liminal. It feels like a sort of space between.
It's in between,
stained by something,
yeah. And then someone posted a reply to it saying something like, if you no clip out of reality, you end up in the Backrooms. And so it became this kind of what they call creepypasta, like a kind of internet myth, I suppose. And then it sort of grew, and this whole mythology grew around it. And then this guy built a whole series of films that are really good, and that's now a motion picture scene. So no, it's kind of, but it's this always happens with the internet, doesn't it? Where something really good comes out, and then it kind of just. It's like it goes mainstream almost on the internet, and then people just don't quite get it, and it kind of like, all the kind of it's like brutalism. Brutalism was another great example. Right? Like that was a real trend a few years ago, and I love brutalism. I've taken photos of it for years. Again, it's kind of there's some weirdness to it that I really like. And again, it would just be people posting pictures of like concrete, anything. Like there's a style to this thing, and like people seem to sort of lose the style almost, don't they? The feel for it.
Well, they don't know what it really means, and so you've got people that like the concept of liminality and liminal got real popular in academia probably 2015 or something, and that's when I started writing my series Liminal, and then I noticed like a bunch of people like you said the empty spaces trend started happening, and there's all these people that are just putting pictures up of things and calling it liminal. I'm like, not quite how it works, guys.
And was this a North American project, or was this over in the UK? Or
I think it was global. It was anywhere.
Yeah, it was everywhere. Yeah.
They spent some time in Detroit. Detroit is a back room in and of itself, the whole city.
Dude, I mean, like there is some ruin porn that comes out of Detroit that I just think is fucking awesome.
Staggering.
It's like libraries with books falling off the shelves and covered in pigeon shit. And it's like just awesome stuff.
Earth consuming it.
Yeah. It looks like, what was that movie with Will Smith? I Am Legend.
I Am Legend, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, the sets of that remind me of this Detroit.
Sure. Yeah.
There's a guy on YouTube that goes to places like that, isn't there? I was watching him yesterday, actually, weirdly. He goes to deliberately goes to forgotten parts of America. What's his name?
Yeah.
I've forgotten Sabbatical. That's his name. He's really good. He's like a guy from New York, and he's really unpatronized, and he just goes to these towns and finds these kind of real rundown kind of like where the Earth's almost taking over places.
Yeah.
I saw that in Chernobyl. When I went to Chernobyl, it was like that. It was like nature was kind of I went there 2015, 16, something like that. Okay. Just before the TV show, so I'm cool. No, but it's like nature just taking back over an area. There's something really dramatic about it, and kind of it's beautiful. It's it's amazing. That place is amazing. If you want to see brutalist stuff, go to Chernobyl.
I rode my motorcycle down the old Route 66 in the United States. I followed it religiously. Like I had a map that showed me this road is no longer called 66, but it was the original 66. And I followed it from Chicago to LA on my motorcycle. And some of the places that you go through when you do that is you drive through these little strip areas, and there's this dilapidated, gas station that you could tell like once was a thriving, bustling area with like neon that's no longer working and like motorized signs that are broken. And like, you're like, this used to be the shit.
Yeah.
And now it's just nothing. It's like half of the stuff isn't even open anymore, but it's
A lot
cool
of,
to look at.
A lot of roadside attractions around there too.
Yeah. A lot of weird roadside attractions. Like, there was one that was the Black Madonna. That was in Missouri, I think.
Okay.
And it was a statue from somewhere in Europe, I forget, that had been rescued from a fire. And the only thing that had happened to the statue is it turned the Madonna black, but it had not burned the statue, just like it blackened the statue.
Okay.
It's just so fun. For some reason, that made it, something they were interested in. So like they made a shrine in Missouri, of all places, in the middle of Missouri on Route 66. There's this shrine. And it's like really beautiful. Like you go into the shrine, but there's nobody there.
Yeah.
I was the only person there.
Okay.
There wasn't even a priest. Nobody greeted me. Like I just rode up, parked, got off my bike, walked into this shrine, walked around, spent an hour there. Nobody there.
Fantastic.
They had like these little cards that you like supposedly use in an exorcism, which was cool. Like exorcism cards of St. Michael.
Just in case.
Well, I guess you used it to trump the devil, like, oh, St. Michael, Trump.
Right.
I win the hand.
So you were on TV recently, weren't you, Brian?
I was, yeah.
What?
WGN.
So what tell us about that? That's cool.
I mean, it was weird because actually two ex-Vikings that we live. So the way my living situation now is I'm living with Matt from the Viking Youth, and right below us is Mr. King, or Thomas Shade, I think is what he went by on the Viking Youth. So we all kind of still hover in the same atmosphere. And like 2 weeks earlier, Mr. King got brought on to WGN. The show before the one that I was on, to promote his project, which is Sleep Baseball, which is this great, it's very weird. It's very Mr. King. It's like he created this entire fictional universe of these baseball teams, and he creates and does the play-by-play for these games that are completely made up, completely fictional from these fictional teams. And then does all the crowd noises, the commercials. And the conceit of it is that like, it's supposed to be so boring that it puts you to sleep. And so the crowd's kind of this white noise, and it's kind of has this lulling thing. King has a very like deep monotone, but good radio voice. And they're just very subtly hilarious and very subtly strange. There's always like some sort of excitement, boring excitement that breaks out in the game. I think the most recent game, there was a pillow fight during the 7th inning or something. And it's kind of blown up on him. Like he got covered in the New Yorker. He got covered, I think, at the Washington Post. Like he's been getting like big press out of it, weirdly enough. So he was on WGN like 2 weeks earlier. And then like 2 days after he was on, the producer from the show that I was on reached out and said, hey, we're doing this piece on Norwood Park, which is the neighborhood that our brewery's in, and do you want to come on? So like within 2 weeks, the two of us were on the same TV station, different shows, but the same TV station. Yeah, and I got pulled on there and did my pitch for the brewery, and then I was surprised a lot more people recognized than I thought they would. I wore my alum shirt because I always try to like, thread a little bit out in there into the world. But then I was very surprised like how many people like knew who Lam was and recognized it. Were excited by it. So I was,
yeah, the Discord appreciated the Lamb t-shirt. That's cool. So it is. It seems apt that Vikings would start a brewery. That's for sure.
I mean, yeah, it's kind of it's the same project, just with a different skin on it. It's always trying to bring that, I don't know if it's the message or like just the weird or just that texture of experience and information. You know, we tried to do it with a podcast, and now, you know, the next iteration was like, well, people like beer. Like we can you know, the spoonful of sugar kind of thing. We can put a lot of strange and wonderful information out there through the auspices of beer. And you know, I think some people, and I understand this critique, some people think that we're exploiting the weird to sell beer, and like nothing could be further from the truth. If anything, it's like hurts our sales. You know, it's not a benefit to do this, but like it's what drives us and what makes it fun for us, you know. So we were talking about Parsons before. We did a Rachmaninoff beer. We've done one called Melodic Glossolalia. You know, we're always trying to kind of noodle these kind of auteur thread, or these kind of you know, strange threads into both the imagery and the language on the beer. And then, you know, you come to the space, and it's definitely, I think we had Ken Lane out there.
Oh, cool.
And early on when we opened, it was great. And I'm trying to remember now, he described the place as, boy, I'm going to drop what he said now. Something like, I think if Terrence McKenna created a Masonic lodge or something, is like what the place looks like.
That sounds like a Ken quote.
Yeah. I always say it's like Pee-wee's Playhouse meets Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is probably more accurate.
Yeah.
You know, there's always that thing of like, you know, you want it to be kind of strange and challenging, but you want it to be enough to not run people off. You know.
Yeah.
Well, the Viking Youth was like OG podcasting, wasn't it? I mean, that was the inspiration for SittingNow. I mean, like,
well, yeah, dude, they were doing their podcast when we were doing Grey Lodge.
It was.
We started podcasting in 2004, so that tells you how far back.
Yeah. So I think we started right after New Year's of 2005.
Yeah.
2004, 2005.
Yeah.
Because it had just come out, and it just like you could smell it. Like, now, unfortunately, I think we were, and probably you were as well, like a little too early on the thing, you know. And like we just kind of fried out before. But you know, to actually monetize it and to be able to keep doing it, you know.
Yeah, that's kind of why we jumped off, is because like we had a lot of fun. We were doing it, like, if you remember Grey Lodge, we were getting like mad numbers. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, like, podcasting became a thing that you did for money.
Right.
And like, I think Mark, what's his name? WTF guy?
Mark Maron.
Maron. And I had him on the podcast. He was on the Grey Lodge podcast, like the early days. And then all of a sudden he broke out and became like something that was commercial success. Yeah. And then everybody was talking to me about, like, you know, advertising, and I was like, yeah, I think I'm done.
Yeah.
I was doing it for, I like the fact that it was like grassroots.
Yeah.
Like roll your own radio station, basically. Yeah. I like that aspect of it. But when it became commercial, I kind of like, I don't know, I lost interest.
Yeah. I would have loved to have become commercial.
No, I mean, yeah, I'm not knocking it.
For any opportunity to not work a regular job that I can find, you know.
No, dude, like I was really happy for Mark Maron, because like when I had him on the podcast, you know, I was living in LA and I went over there, and he was just like set up in a garage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he still is.
Well, it probably still is, but like he probably has better equipment. Like, yes. But he was like it was just like shoestring together shit in the garage.
Yeah.
And I was like, see, that's what we're about. Like, you know, that's what I liked.
And he's an interesting guy. I mean, he'll every once in a while drop Wilhelm Reich on his show and Burroughs and like, you know, he kind of does not as overtly, but does a subtle thing. No. Where he kind of puts some interesting ideas out to people that would otherwise never.
And I've talked to him personally. He's kind of one of us. Like,
I get that.
He's definitely he's like Gen X, and
Yep.
You could say Church of the Subgenius, and he'd know what you were talking about.
That's always a bit of a test these days.
That's kind of the test, isn't it?
Yeah. Praise Bob, and then you like look at their reaction just to see if they know what you.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I mean, you guys had some good people on. Didn't you have like Pinchback on and people like that?
We had Daniel on once or twice. Wow. We had Corey Doctorow on. We had Alex Gray on. Wow. We did Eric Davis a couple times on the playa, and then I just had Eric at the bar in April because he's got his new book out.
Yeah,
and so he came out. I've been trying to get him out. We originally were talking about having him at our old space. So we used to have this space where it was just a production facility, but we had this awesome outdoor space here in the city. Our landlord didn't want us to have a tap room because he lived at that building, but he had this space where he would allow us to have big bonfires and parties. So the original plan back right before High Weirdness came out was to get Eric to promote High Weirdness, get him out, and he was going to do. We were going to do a variation of the 9 Herbs Charm. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's kind of like a spell and a song and a drink and like. So he was going to like talk about the 9 Herbs Charm, and then we were going to have a band. You know, there's different bands that we talked about. One was 6 Organs of Admittance. We were talking about trying to get different bands out there to perform their version of the 9 Herbs Charm, while then the people that were at the event would make a beer based on the 9 Herbs Charm, which would have been really cool. Things blew up, life got in the way, COVID happened. And then so finally, as Blotter came out, he was like, "Hey, I want to go around and promote this thing. How about we do something now?" So he came out and we did an event with him, did a barrel-aged beer to celebrate the thing. And then because the book's about Blotter, perforated blotter paper. So we printed the label for the bottle on perforated blotter paper, which was
cool.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So that was kind of exciting. That was a great event. That was a
no, it definitely was seminal before its time. Viking Youth. It's a bit like Out There was a bit like that as well. Raymond's show. It was came just a bit too early. Yeah. For it kind of popped off because we used to get crazy numbers back then as well. I mean, back before it was like the only thing people could consume, I suppose, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So even sitting now, we used to get way bigger numbers than we get now because there's so much choice now, I guess, isn't there? And little avenues that people go down. But we were at one point, we were pretty much the only podcast covering the occult or anything like that. There was like this little brief window of time. And then, but no, it's like, it's good to have you back on a podcast. It's been a while.
Fun, man.
It's a weird time to come back. It's like, one thing I've been looking at is, do you know Russell Brand? I don't think we've spoken about this yet, have we? You know, he converted to
Christianity.
Yeah.
Shit.
Well,
it couldn't get worse.
But did you see what happened?
That's a trend.
Which part?
Oh yeah. We'll talk about the trend in a minute. But he got baptized, and then the next day went on to talk about, I didn't expect the experience to be so great. But then he does the thing where he starts reading tarot cards. So immediately, all these sort of people that are on his side, like the evangelical kind of guys, were all suddenly, hang on a minute.
Whoa.
Yeah. I thought you were a Christian, but this is like, so it's kind of, he's still trying to grift the New Age stuff, but at the same time, grift Christianity. It's great. I've never seen someone try to do both before. It's a
grifter is a
grifter. Gene Scott, dude. Like, do you remember Gene Scott?
I know the name.
Yeah,
name sounds familiar. Yeah,
I brought him up a few times. I'm doing later this week. I'm appearing on a radio thing that I guess they're doing a thing about Art Bell, and they want to talk to people that have been on the show. And I brought up Gene Scott, and the producers had never heard of Gene Scott, and I'm like, you need to look this guy up. Gene Scott was I'm doing air quotes, fundamentalist preacher, like not fundamentalist, like we know. But he was like completely off his rocker. He was like Bill Cooper, but more fun.
Okay.
Right? So he would like Gene Scott would like sit there and talk for a minute, and then he'd like, okay, I'm going to tell you the secrets of the Anunnaki, but I'm not going to do that until the next $3,000 comes through on the phone. And then he would just like cut away to slow motion pictures of his Tennessee walking horses running in a circle. Like in the stable, and then he would start playing his accordion and say, "If you don't send me $3,000, you're just a pissant for the Lord." And he'd start singing, "Pissants for the Lord, pissants for the Lord." The guy was fucking awesome, dude, and he was like at 3:00 in the morning, right? So we used to come home from the clubs. This is in the 80s. We come home from the clubs like high as a kite and be like, Gene Scott. And we turn on Gene Scott and just sit there and die laughing.
Yeah.
So if anybody can like he's on YouTube.
There's nothing up on you. There is, yeah.
Oh yeah, dude, there's tons of stuff on YouTube. The best stuff probably not, but some of it is. He'd look like a bum. He'd like come out and he'd have like 3 pairs of glasses on, like stacked on top of each other, like he had 3 eyes.
Okay.
And he'd be like unshaven and like look like he probably hasn't bathed in a while. And he'd just sit there and talk for like hours and hours and hours. Very intelligent dude, but like just wackadoodle stuff he was talking about, like, you know, like all like Anunnaki and like stuff that you wouldn't imagine a Christian preacher would be talking about. But he'd tie it back around.
Do we know what happened to him?
He died.
He died.
Yeah,
that happens.
But he somehow, this is probably the most impressive part. He'd be talking complete smack, and yet people would be sending him the money. He'd always hit his goals.
Wow.
He's like, I want $3,000 in the next 10 minutes. He'd get it.
Okay.
Wow.
Because he would say, I'm not going to tell you the next part of the sermon until you pay me.
Does anybody have an accordion handy?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He died, and his wife. I'm sorry, his daughter took it over. But like, she's not entertaining at all. I tried. Yeah, she's not funny.
You've got to be entertaining with it. It's like there's that modern guy. I think we spoke about him a while ago. The guy that was during COVID that there was a kind of meme made about him cursing COVID-19.
Oh.
What was his name? That guy, and he keeps getting buying private jets and things.
I can't remember. He just has like these weird eyes.
Yeah. He's got a strange face. Like
a really strange face with like these deep set eyes.
Yeah. I can't remember his name now, but yeah, he's great. COVID-19, I banished the. Yeah. He's great. I love American preachers. There's something about them. Like,
hasn't worked yet.
because they have no shame.
Yeah. Our preachers here are boring as hell.
Yeah.
They're all kind of like, you know, wearing robes and stuff here. So it's we're old school.
I always wonder, like, how much do you think it's necessary to buy your own bullshit on that kind of thing when you're a con man? Like, you have to buy
I can never figure it out.
Yeah.
Because I know I could do it. I mean,
I can't do it. Yeah, that's
I can do it, but I'm not buying my own bullshit when I do it. I'm playing a role. Like I can do that. Freaked
out if anybody would get too excited about me, you know, like like, oh, okay, I want to get away from this person. Where they're just like, they buy their own bullshit and they just want all the people around them fawning on them and giving them money.
Well, I think to a certain extent, to be successful, and again, that's in air quotes, to do that and to grift money off of people, because that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
And in a lot of cases, you're grifting off of the people that can probably least afford to give it to you, which is weird, but that's a trend. You have to buy into your own bullshit, because if you have a conscience, you couldn't do it.
Right.
You know, you have to put that shit on hold.
But you think that they actually believe what they're espousing to some degree, like,
unless they're the most amazingly cynical human beings that ever walked the planet, they would have to be. But again, I'm probably wrong, because I overestimate the potential of humanity all the time. And so they probably are that cynical, because I've met people that are that cynical. So
like, I feel like Hubbard probably believed his bullshit to some degree, you know,
until the end, like, because he was sitting in an RV in Palm Desert, like downing SRIs and like all kinds of like drugs that like he supposedly stood, like the whole thing was like anti-psychiatry,
right?
And he was like gobbling those drugs like they were going out of style, apparently, in real life. So
that Tom Cruise interview always reminds me of that, you know, where he's like, do you know the history of psychiatry? Do you remember Matt, what's his name, I can't remember the name of the that interview that's a classic. I mean, that
you're glib, Matt, you're glib.
I mean, that was part of the thing that kicked off Chinology and stuff like that, wasn't it? The Anonymous. It was like that was a great period. I love that. The early Anonymous was fantastic. It just seems to be, again, that's another thing. It's just like the we were saying about liminal spaces. Anonymous was another thing that got kind of wrecked. because it went mainstream. All of a sudden, it came off 4chan, didn't it, into the real world, and then all of a sudden, I remember there was this guy on Facebook that posted it. It was a picture of him with the mask on, so like immediately he's not he's like completely missed the point immediately.
Right.
And then he started posting stuff on Facebook, going, well, if you want to get in contact with the leaders of Anonymous, then just send me a DM. And it's like, it's
the leaders.
It's decentralized, right? That's the whole point of it. It's like
it was until it wasn't. I mean, there was also the early days of Anonymous. I remember there was a Guy Fawkes mask. It was like plain white.
Yeah, and also big afros. That was
yeah.
Huge afros and a suit.
And
that was kind of the original look for Anonymous. And they were closing down swimming pools online and putting swastikas in the swimming pool and things like that. And then there was that famous news story, wasn't there, with I think they literally closed the pool down. Or they stuck a poster up saying pool's closed. That was it. And then there was like a news there was like a news report on it. And then the famous in the news report, they said that they called them the Internet Hate Machine. And then, so then they became known they called themselves the Internet Hate Machine, which I thought was fantastic. But yeah, those were kind of
lean into it, baby. If they're gonna throw it at you, lean into it.
Yeah, they were the cool days of Anonymous. Then it went a bit wrong.
Yeah, I mean, like even as recently as like 2014, I was in San Francisco long term doing a contract. And I was hanging out at the hacker spaces, and like, most people there were involved in Anonymous, as an activist at some level. But already at that point, there had started to boil up like a set of people that were considered the leaders. And I was like, I'm not interested. I don't like joining things that have leaders.
Were they involved with what's it called? Occupy Wall Street? Was that anything to do? Because I'd lost interest at that point, but
that's when they started to fade, like, because there was like 2014, 2015, everybody that had formerly been, allied with Anonymous, including myself, didn't want to say so publicly anymore because like there was all these Fed busts and all these people were flipping and like it was just weird. I'm like, I don't want to be anywhere near this shit.
Well, there was that big giant thing that happened. So there was like Chinology was the Scientology thing, and then they sort of did these more sort of smaller raids. They called them. But then there was like another movement that kind of built off the back of it called LulzSec.
Yep.
And then there was LulzSec and Anti-Sec, I think, were the two things, and that's where all the federal cases started coming in because they were like hacking Sony and I can't remember who else did they do. They got Sony and a few really big targets, didn't they? And
and it was a lot of political activism too. They were helping. They were putting wireless access points online in third world countries that were having revolutions at the time. If you remember, like that's when Egypt was going haywire, and there was like the Arab Spring. Remember that? Yeah. And Anonymous was the people that I knew that were allied with Anonymous. I won't say members, were doing things to help those causes, which I even at that point was doing things to help those causes. And then all of a sudden, people that you didn't expect were like, would come out. You'd find out that they had been grabbed and flipped by the feds and been working with the feds for like 6 months. You're like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
I thought this was just a social movement, but the feds didn't. The feds looked at it as a legit threat,
terrorist organization or something.
I mean,
very near it. Yeah.
I was, because at the time when the original Anonymous was happening, when the protests against Scientology started, I was working at this kind of academic think tanky kind of thing called Inform, and I remember a specialist branch of the police got in contact with me because I was the anonymous guy there. I was the one tracking it.
Yeah,
and they were concerned because the original protest, members of a group called Combat 18 here in England were turning up. But they were just leaving because they were like, "What the fuck is this?" I think they just turned up to. It's like we have them now, EDL and people like that. They just turn up to any protest just for a fight, basically.
Right.
And, but I think they turned up to all these like clowns in like suits and Guy Fawkes masks with, like long cat signs and stuff, and like they backed off. But you can kind of see the threat, though. You know, this idea of like hundreds of people in masks going through the underground system in London, and yeah. So it was like, I was like, no, don't worry, there's nothing dodgy. But then a year later, so I just convinced them all that I was like, no, there's nothing wrong. You know, it's just memes and stuff. And a year later, the feds are kind of breaking down their doors and arresting them for all sorts. So I probably had a bit of egg on my face after that, but yeah, it's a different. I see them as different things, but
it was different people. So like at one point, it was just like there were no leaders. You didn't know who anybody was, and that was the point. It's like it was decentralized and anonymous. Quote the word.
Yeah.
So you literally didn't know who you were dealing with, which is good in a way, but looking back on it, it's also, you know, it was primed to be molded by the feds. So it wasn't surprising
as well.
Yeah, exactly. And then you started to get people signing, doing what they were doing and calling what they were doing in accordance with anonymous, and it was like bullshit that they were doing.
Right.
So that's the problem with an open door policy is like any moron can walk in and claim to be you or claim to be doing things on your behalf.
Yeah. Like circling back to the Russell Brand thing, though, like it is a real trend, isn't it? The modern conspiracy theorist starts off as like a new ager, then becomes a conspiracy theorist, and then I think they call that conspirituality now, where it's like this kind of combination of the new age and conspiracy theory. And it's not, like I say, we've spoken about this before, but it's not the cool old school 90s conspiracy theories anymore. It's the kind of not so fun,
gross, weaponized shit.
Yeah. And then, but the end game is they always end up as Christians for some reason. And
well, you know, like we were talking about somebody earlier, we won't say their name publicly, but they were kind of the epitome of like what happened like around 2014. I started hearing people talking about neo-reactionary movement. And this whole thing, it was a move towards conservatism. And somehow it always involved the Orthodox Catholic sect of the church, which is like, you know, the most conservative of the conservatives, and except for like maybe Opus Dei. And so that started as a trend, and then that morphed into alt-right. Those same people like started calling themselves alt-right, and then that morphed into like what it morphed into. But like there always seemed like in the last 15 years, there's been a move towards people that were in, like even people that I knew they were pagan, like are telling me that they're becoming Orthodox Christians.
No. I mean, you open your mind to enough bullshit, you know, you can let anything in.
Yeah.
And eventually that, if it's so wide open, you're going to look towards authoritarianism some degree to kind of reorder the insane ideas you've let in.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, it's because people don't have the framework of model agnosticism, which it's okay to
critical thinking.
Yeah, it's okay to let in some bullshit sometimes, just as long as you know that there should be an end to it.
That's right.
Like, I'm going to take on this bullshit
without caring, without absorbing it.
Exactly. I can hold it without absorbing it. So like, I'm going to take this belief system on for like 6 weeks. And then I'm going to turn it off. You know, and I'm doing it as an exercise of understanding that point of view, understanding a different point of view. Like there's all kinds of reasons you can do it. But unfortunately, again, I have had people that went down that path we just described
and get lost.
That when I tried to get back to them and be like, how did you get here? You know, and they're like, well, I'm just using the Robert Anton Wilson model. I'm like, no, the fuck you are not. Like I knew Bob Wilson and he fucking hated what you're standing for right now, dude. Like he would not hesitate to tell you that you're full of shit.
Man, you should see the Robert Anton Wilson Facebook group. Fucking hell.
I can't imagine.
That's like a real alt-righty, didn't it?
Yeah, real bad. Like it was like I think their argument was because he called himself a libertarian, didn't he?
Right.
So,
at one time, but then later he said, I don't really call myself a libertarian anymore because I don't hate poor people that much.
Right. Yeah. He spent most of his life as a poor person. I mean,
yeah,
libertarianism meant something very different back
Exactly.
too.
Dude, back in the 80s, I called myself a libertarian, but I was a left-leaning libertarian.
Yeah.
Which
That
meant that,
exists.
like, socially, I had a lot in common with the libertarians, and definitely I believed in smaller government and things like that. But I didn't hate poor people that much, like, you know.
And immigrants is the big
And
one.
immigrants, yeah. So when in the late 80s is when I jumped off that train, is when you started to get people like Ron Paul on board, who was writing for fascist magazines on the side, which nobody knew at the time or didn't pay attention, but eventually it came out that a lot of those people are fucking racist, you know, and they hate poor people. We'll say it again. I grew up, you know, a poor, middle-class, blue-collar kid in Chicago, like, you know, union family. My family was like bread truck drivers and shit like that. You know, it's like, we were poor. Like we weren't like dirt poor, but we weren't rich.
Right.
We weren't close to being rich. We were like made enough to keep, you know, like to keep your car running, you know, pay your taxes, pay your rent. You know,
why is it always that there's a move as a conscious person? There seems to be a move. Now the left is got their own problems right now too, but it seems like as you become more conscious and more sensitive, the natural progression is to move towards the left, towards a more compassionate, you know, all embracing thing. But then there's just all these traps, and the only trap that there is to go all the way in the other extreme. You know, why aren't there left traps for the people going to the right? You know,
Ken, you and I have talked about this before. Like, I've never been like a traditional leftist. Like, I was never a Marxist or anything like that. But like, there was enough things in the left that attracted me that I felt comfortable there. It was, what do you call it? I think, Ken, you called it our shelter or something like that. A place that we could shelter. Like, we didn't feel as centrist. I didn't feel like, you know, like I had to explain myself. All the time. And these days I can't be anywhere around the left or the right, but I can't be around the left because I'm always having to explain myself.
Yeah, and it's just
so
it's
fucking
scary
tired
there
of that.
too.
Yeah, it is. It's everyone seems to be out to trap each other all the time.
Exactly.
That's one thing I've
Everything's a
noticed.
gotcha. Everything's a gotcha.
Yeah.
I watch a lot of debate stuff on YouTube. There's a really good guy, Destiny, I quite like. He seems to be a bit more, I don't know, I don't know what the word is, rational left, I suppose. You know, he's logical left, I'd say. But, you know, he tends to like get the data, look at it, and build an opinion from that, rather than the kind of group think on the extremes of the left and the right kind of thing. But even in like the debate world, it seems to be like it's just all gotchas. It's like traps, people laying traps for each other. It's like, ha kind of thing. It's like, ooh, it's not a good place to be, I don't think. I mean,
well, not only that, but if you express any kind of like interest in anything spiritual and mystical, then the left people now like want to go all Amazing Randy on you. They just want to debate like why you're crazy. There's something wrong with you, and why can you believe that shit? And it's like, do you ever heard of the middle? There's a middle here. Like, can you not get in the middle on this? But no, they can't. Like,
well, no, I think there's a both sides have a thing against the middle now, don't they? That's seen as just as bad.
There is no middle. That's the thing. There's a hard line. It's like
pick a side. We're in a war.
There's no gradient in the middle. It's like it's a hard line. You're like over here, and you're Christopher Hitchens, or you're over here, and you're whatever the whatever the hardline Christian people are. And so like you can't be in the middle.
No. Yeah,
because there isn't as far as they're concerned, there is no middle. And really, if you think about it, there is no middle. It's gone.
No nuance.
Which is cool for me because like now I'm completely out of the conversation. I'm over here on a middle path.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Which is like not on the path at all.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a scary time, man. I don't know how we get out of this, you know.
Well, we don't, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
It's like we disengage from whatever this thing is that's going on, this machine, and we let it run into the wall.
And then what?
Well, I mean, because we're not engaged, it doesn't matter. It's like like me, I moved north. Oh, I do live in the world. Yeah. I moved north. I kind of like got out of the tech business. I've like disengaged socially. I've found a group of people that I call my community.
Mhm.
We grow our own food.
Yeah.
Like we're all off-grid people,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
and that's in like, so what happens next? You know, at some point, yes, it does affect you, but
Mm.
it really doesn't affect you as much as you think it does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's the move, right? Is like kind of go into smaller communities that are manageable with multiple voices.
Yeah.
And yeah, find a way to sustain yourself and persist and let the world burn. I mean,
go back to the original model, which is like, you don't have more than 100 people in your tribe because the human brain is not set up to handle more than that.
No, I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever see Herzog did a documentary ages ago called Lo and Behold? It's all about the internet. And I think his kind of conclusion was that we're just not meant to be disconnected to each other.
Not.
And he kind of does quite a good job on that one, because some of them is just him talking about, I don't know, like the beauty of death or whatever. He talks about.
That's what he does.
He does it quite well.
The ecstasy of life, or of death, rather. Whatever. Yeah, no, he's great. I love Herzog. But so conspirituality is like a thing now. A friend of mine went to I guess a new age, what I would have called a new age fair back in the day, which are now apparently called mind and body festivals, or the wellness festivals. That's the other
there
one.
you go. Yeah. Everything's wellness now.
Yeah. And apparently even he said he just went out of morbid curiosity, because he had this sort of similar thing to me, where I've had this sort of hankering to see if there's any trace of these 90s kind of new age fairs where you could pick up Crowley books and things like that. Apparently there's nothing like that anymore. But
nope.
He said that there are 2 stalls at this. It's quite a big event. Apparently it's like a big one here in the UK. And there were 2 stalls. One was the Catholic Church, and one was I think it's called like Alpha or something. It's where the Christians try and get hip with the kids, and
sing songs.
But it's telling that the Christianity is willing to come to something like this now. Like, so is that desperation, or is that recruiting? Do you know what I mean? It's like, are they seeing this as a pathway now? Are they seeing it as a pathway now, which they never used to? So that's kind of interesting. They sort of say that it's kind of like before they'd always be like, you can't touch tarot cards, you can't touch any of that stuff because that's the devil, blah, 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 that's paganism. But now they're getting in with the pagans to bring them in. And it's like,
the fundamentalist Protestant evangelical people will never go that route, because but the Catholic Church has been moving in that direction for a long time. It's like they're trying to be more inclusive. And I'm not trying to cut them any slack, because they're the fucking church, and like, I'm anti-cross and crown. Fuck them. But having said that, if you notice what's happening with the Catholic Church, there's been this move to be more inclusive and be more liberal from a political perspective, but also a social perspective.
We're losing membership like crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Why not? Like, why not try to gain some of your membership back? Because at the end of the day, it's a corporation. We know this, right?
Yeah. A very big one.
Big one. Yes. One of the biggest.
Maybe the oldest corporation. You never know.
Definitely one of the oldest and one of the biggest.
And I don't think that there's no possibility for someone to gain value out of that, but it's limited by the kind of oppressive nature of the thing. I think that, I was raised as a Catholic, and I still know Catholic people, and there's plenty of people that have some kind of angle into spirit in that. I have strong opinions about the limited nature of that, but like, it's also like, if it brings someone something for a moment, I think it's okay. But yeah, I don't know what I'm saying. I guess I'm just saying I'm not going to throw somebody to the wolves just because.
No. I'm totally okay with it, as long as they're not proselytizing me.
Yeah.
Ironically, people. Yeah. Some of the most transgressive people I know went to Catholic school. I think because they were so desperate to press against it.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
They're so desperate to do anything but. They end up, becoming transgressive kind of figures. It's interesting.
And there's also there's a real history of a certain kind of magic in the Catholic religion, in the Catholic Mass, you know, transubstantiation and that kind of thing. So you can, it's not hard to see a move from Catholicism to ceremonial magic, you know. And I think, like, if you look at the history of the AA, many of those folks from the AA made a move back to Catholicism.
Yeah, that happens a lot. And if you look at the structure of the rituals in like Golden Dawn, they have roots in Catholicism. Absolutely. You know,
well, the Gnostic masses are kind of
the Gnostic Mass is one, you know, like, but even like the Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram, it's like, if you look at the structure and what you're doing, it's Christian in nature.
Sure. I think based on the Book of Enoch, you know, I think my current theory is like, it's kind of if you go far enough back and you look at how that thing is structured, I think it's structured. It was basically the magician is Enoch, and he's calling forth the archangels as part of it, pulled from text in the Book of Enoch. But that, you know, that doesn't get taught to anybody when they're learning the LBRP, you know. And
I think a lot of people don't even know why they do the LBRP.
That's
exactly.
It's just the thing you do when you know, you
does it matter?
Order, isn't it?
I don't know if it matters. You know, like, as long as you have, like, I also, like, so I was just talking to somebody recently where we were talking about the LBRP and the cardinal directions of the elements, and he's like, "Well, I've always done the elements this way," and I'm like, "Well, I think it's this way," but then I was like, "It doesn't matter. What I think matters is having a ritual that's ingrained in your consciousness that is like, this is the reset button. You know, ultimately it's all a skin, you know, it's all a place that takes you to, I think, the same place. But so does it matter? I think it matters to some people, and I think it matters at some point, you know, but ultimately for the function of the practice, I don't know that. I mean, look at chaos magic. You know, people made all kinds of strange and often humorous banishing rituals, you know, to that work for them, you know. Now, who knows if it works for them when they get into real weird, hardcore, creepy shit, but, you know, it works for the day to day. Well,
that's one side thing of the weird, creepy shit seems to be really picking up at the moment. In terms of like the left-hand path kind of stuff seems to be really, really popular at the moment. Like Grant's really popular now, which is great. I'm really happy about that. Yeah. Because I think because again, it keeps going back to that thing, doesn't it? The minute the internet gets its hands on certain things, it kind of ruins it. Like Crowley's another great example, isn't it? Crowley's been so, I mean, all the debates you see on Crowley these days online, I just find it so boring. You get all these it's just pedantry, most of it. It's like, no, Crowley didn't mean this, he meant this. And you're just like, well, who gives a fuck, really, at the end of the day? It's like, I don't know. It's like,
that's why I don't hang out on those forums, dude.
Why do you think the move towards the more extreme stuff is happening? Do you have a theory on that, or do you have?
I think it's to do with accessibility, a lot of it. But I think there's a lot of different things, but one of the things I think is, I think to read Crowley, you have to read a shitload of stuff, basically. And you have to read it in his kind of pseudo-biblical kind of the way he writes. You know, the guy grew up on the Bible. I mean, that's the only book he was allowed to read. So he's
channeling his dad to a certain extent.
You know, so I think it was Peter Gray said that there's a lot of kind of backdoor Christianity in that kind of stuff. And
there is. That's what I was just saying earlier.
Not even backdoor.
It's kind of built in.
And so the whole what's interesting is I've been reading a lot of stuff about Tantra and you know, kind of what they consider to be the left-hand path, and you still go, well, hang on a minute, you've just taken this, sort of wrung it through Christianity or the language of Christianity and regurgitated it as magic in a lot of cases, especially sex magic. Sex magic is, I don't know how they managed to do that, but it's and if you look at some of the Golden Dawn stuff as well, you see its roots and you think, well, what they've done is they've just, because that was the model of the time, the language of the time, they've taken these kind of older traditions and to sort of Christianize them, basically.
Well, the Golden Dawn,
they kind of had to.
From the Book of Revelations, right? Isn't the Golden Dawn a reference to the woman of the Golden Dawn, like the woman, the I don't know if it's married, but there's a, I can't remember what chapter it is, but there's a woman that is coming. It's not Babylon, but it's
Scarlet Woman.
Is it the Scarlet Woman?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe, but yeah, there's a reference where it's like literally one translation is like makes reference to the Golden Dawn, where she brings forth the child of the Golden Dawn or something.
Yeah.
Like that. I mean, it's not.
Well,
it's not
I mean,
very veiled, it's there.
What the conversation is coming from these days, which like, because I've been thinking about it a lot. The LBRP, just to touch on this real quick, is like what it taught me by deconstructing it when I first started getting to know it and use it and memorize it. I started to wonder where these things came from, and really, it tracked back to shamanism.
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing about drawing the circle, the dome, the four cardinal directions, like that comes from shamanism, right? So that's that's a good thing. You should know these things.
That's a big umbrella.
That's a big umbrella, but but it leads you in a new path. I mean, because of that exploration that I did in the early days in the 80s, when I was an active member of the Golden Dawn, it led me to eventually gradiate over towards shamanism, to where now my practice is like 99.9% shamanism.
Meaning animistic, or what do you mean?
Meaning animistic. Yeah.
I think that's
so.
I think Berthier will be the next big thing. I think.
I hope so.
We'll see.
Yeah,
but what I was going to say is like the conversation for the stuff that like Grant, and why is he popular right now? Like one thing that's like responsible for that is this UAP conversation.
Yeah, that's the other one.
What's coming through the back door of that is that conversation about the Collins elite, and what's coming through that is the whole conspiracy of Jack Parsons opened a portal, let in these spirits that weren't really aliens; they were demons. Kenneth Grant gets dragged into that conversation. That's where people that never heard of Kenneth Grant before were exposed to the name and then started looking into it. And of course, because they're reactionary people and hand wavers, literalists, they're going to be clutching pearls and weeping and gnashing their teeth.
That's a tough space to go through if you're a literalist, man. I mean, that's right. It scared the shit out of me too.
Dude, I just had this conversation with somebody yesterday that never, like, Ken, you know why I had this conversation, but that had never heard of all this stuff. Like, and I was explaining to them that Kenneth Grant was this guy who used to study with Crowley, who came upon the realization that Lovecraft wasn't writing fiction. He was unconsciously channeling things that like were probably pre-Sumerian. And then I got into Lavenda and Simon and like all this stuff. And this person is just like, they're from the entertainment industry and they're just like, listen to me tell this story. And they're like, so you just made all this up? And I'm like, no, dude, I wish I did, but this is all stuff people believe.
It's
like
the next Marvel universe.
Exactly. I'm like, this is the next Marvel universe. They're like, what? Really? People really believe this? I'm like, honest to God, you can Google it. I'll show you where to Google. And like, it's the new thing. It's the new thing now.
Yeah, he pops up everywhere, Grant. Now but I think some of it. I think you're right. It's that. It's also the accessibility thing, but it's also because Starfire just republished all his books as well. I mean, they used to be super. Yeah, because they used to be super expensive, didn't they? To pick up. Really expensive, but now you can get them for like £30 or whatever. For a hardback.
I've got copies on my shelf that I bought in like the early 2000s for like $100-$200.
Yeah, so that's a barrier to entry for like an average, someone exploring this stuff. But now you can get. I mean, there's paperbacks now for like £20, so you can. You can. So yeah, I'd say it's a combination of things. It's not just one particular thing. I think a lot of people try and make it one particular thing, but it isn't. It's a series of coincidences.
Well, it's a constellation of a constellation of situations. That have occurred that have like but I don't think the UAP thing has hurt at all, because it brought Kenneth Grant into a conversation that he was nowhere near before.
But the other thing that's interesting about that though is I'm starting to see Grant adjacent stuff starting to pop up all over the place as well. So Nima is another one. I don't know if you remember Nima. She was kind of like a Grant adjacent. Yeah. I think she was in the OTO in Cincinnati. I think that's right. And became more interested in Grant, and so ended up joining. I believe she joined the Typhonian Order. There's a whole book of her. When you join the Typhonians, you have to write a magical diary. It's a bit like the AA. You have to write a magical diary for a year or a period of time, and they released her diary of that basically not so long ago. And so she's appearing, but Bertio's appearing as well. He was Grant. But there seems to be people, because Grant was quite collaborative, wasn't he? Which is unusual for magicians generally, So he'd name check people all the time. I mean, Spare, another one. He he repopularized Austin Spare, didn't he? And he's kind of. I think that's one of the big things, is that he kind of bridged all these kind of these disparate magician groups together. And
he was a networker, because he wrote to Marjorie Cameron and tried to get her on board, and she kind of ignored him. But he tried to get her on board early.
Well, he could be a bit fast and loose with with facts at times, but and his interpretation of the Kabbalah apparently is a bit squiffy.
What's your guys' read on Marjorie?
Well, I just been doing a lot of research for a project about Marjorie. And so I found out a lot of things about her that was interesting. I think she was what they call a sincere actor, for sure. And after Jack blew himself up, I think she tried to carry on what he was doing. She tried to carry on his current. And then she had problems. I mean, there was one period of time where she was institutionalized. And I think she did that willingly. But there was some other things that she discovered early that kind of weird, but when you look into what they were very ahead of their time. She was definitely way ahead of her time in being a feminist, because she was early in that process, and she was pushing this thing about the feminine warrior spirit. And so I've got a lot of respect for Marjorie. I think she was a great artist. I think she was, like I said, she was wacky, of course, but so am I. If I'm gonna point my finger at anybody for being wacky, I'm gonna look in the mirror first.
No, that's cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
And she was kind of central to that. This is the thing I'm fascinated with, the art movement in LA that was post-beat, pre-hippie. Wallace Berman, Curtis Harrington, right?
Yep.
And then so many of the players in David Lynch's company basically grew out of that as well.
She was right in the middle of all of it. I mean, she was hanging out with Dean Stockwell and Dennis Hopper.
Of that movement, wasn't she? I mean, she was on the cover of the first issue of Seminole, I believe. Right, or one of her paintings was.
Kenneth Anger used it, didn't he?
Kenneth Anger, of course. Yeah. I mean, one of the things, Marjorie and Dennis Hopper and Dean Stockwell apparently were big buddies.
Russ Tamblyn.
And she was she was influential in that movement.
Yes,
like you said, you called it I think you called it. It was the post-beat, pre-hippie movement. It was
woefully understudied at this point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the one book, Wormwood
Star.
But I don't even think it's that comprehensive, because the stuff that I'm have researched recently has shown me there's a whole different side to her.
There was something to do with a black egg, wasn't there, with her? She had this black egg. She was at her funeral. There was a black egg placed, and I think that was some sort of, I guess not OTO adjacent, but kind of Thelema adjacent kind of thing she was doing.
Astral work, I believe. Yeah.
Well, she took up Thelema after Jack died, but then she kind of veered away from it and went her own way, which good for her, because I've always told people it's okay to get into those orders in the early days of your career, but then I think the purpose of the order is to outgrow it.
They're designed for that. I mean,
exactly.
The AA is, it's designed to make new orders and new branches and new lineages. I mean, by design.
And then unfortunately, there's these people that that get in they get caught in the order, and then they're all about getting the next degree.
The politics of
the politics and
Well, I think there's something about. I mean, I spoke about this. I did an interview with who was it with one? Who I think you were about to.
Oh yeah. I just Interviewed by him the other day.
Yeah, I was talking in that about the ATO, and what the ATO, when I was in the ATO, what it definitely did, it attracted different types of people, but one particular type of person it attracted. When you join an order like that, you're guaranteed a built-in friend group, essentially.
Yeah.
So you end up with people that you would never normally necessarily, and this can be a good thing. You end up with people that you would never normally meet or associate with, So,
right.
And sometimes that can be amazing, like I always say, I'm critical of the ATO, but most of my best friends are from the ATO. I made some lifelong friends in that order,
right.
and and I see them all the time. But what it also attracts is these people that wouldn't necessarily be able to accrue that many friends, and I think they stay in these orders to kind of, because it becomes their life, it becomes it's their social circle, it's everything.
Well, they become middle management.
Yeah, basically, and it runs their life though. I mean, I know people in the ATO still that you think, they need that almost. They need that order.
Honest to God, some people do need that, and so if you're going to be in that mode, you might as well become a bureaucrat. But that's not in my nature.
That's true of almost any group. You know, I mean, you see it in
church, I guess.
You see it in any church. You see it at work. I mean, it's just, I mean, people long for that kind of social cohesion, or
they don't.
Some people long for that social cohesion.
Not me.
No, but the problem with that though, and it's it's good for them, but it's not necessarily always so good for other people in the group, as I found out. That's why I left, but you'd end up with some characters, let's call them, in the ATO. But
it teaches you some certain boundaries. Which is always a good lesson to learn in this world.
And then obviously there's I think the other thing with the ATO was its inability to handle PR very well. They'd have these great big scandals, and they just wouldn't handle them. I mean, the one I always think of is the guy that went out into the desert. What's his name? Augustus Sol Invictus.
That guy.
They handled that so badly. I mean,
who ended up going to jail.
Do you know the story of this guy?
Was this the group back in the 60s that had?
No. This was recently.
Okay.
So this is recently. So he was a member of, I believe, Gunther's AA. So there's 3 different AAs that I know of. There's probably more. There's probably like 10. But the 3 big ones, there's like David Shoemaker's one, as far as I know. And Gunther's one, and then there was Jerry Cornelius had one. He just passed away recently. But Gunther's one is the one where all the trouble happens. He was a member of that. He was in, I can't remember what state he was in, but he was in one of the American ATOs. And at one,
he was one of the southern states, I think.
Yeah, he sounds southern. He's got that kind of classic, like Clark Gable almost sort of sounding, but like kind of like southern pretending to be posh kind of voice, hasn't he?
Yeah.
But anyway, he at some point something happened, and he goes out to the desert, sacrifices a goat, does the whole crossing the abyss type thing, and then writes to all. I think he wrote an email to all of the heads or all of the higher ups in the ATO saying you need to pay attention to this document. It's in Class A. And people that don't know what Class A it means, it's like a doctrine.
Holy writ.
Holy writ. Yeah. I'm
in charge now.
He sort of says that it happens all the time. People that think they've written the next chapter. It happened to Jack Parsons. He said that he wrote the final chapters of the Book of the Law, didn't he? So it happens all the time. Anyway, so time passes. He leaves. Time passes, and all of a sudden he's in Charlottesville. One of the main organizers of the Unite the Right rally there.
Yep.
Like proper like high up, and he was. If you go on YouTube now, I think you can see a thing of him in Charlottesville doing a speech about Unite the Right, and he's a really dodgy character. And then I think a few months later, he started running to be a libertarian candidate.
He did.
For a state, and was eventually like arrested for kidnapping his daughter and wife, I think, or something like that. So yeah, he's a real character. I mean, and the OTO,
and he's apparently he's a lawyer,
very
too.
Generous term, it sounds like, for this guy.
I think he's like a bona fide lawyer.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. He's got a YouTube channel, a law YouTube channel.
Which he teaches from prison.
Okay, so he is in prison now.
Well, he was. I don't know if he still is.
Yeah, not anymore. No, but
the great thing about that is like I know the person that published that the account of my crossing the abyss and everything, and I read it and I'm like, dude, are you kidding me? It's like he like made it out to be like I did this great thing 40 days in the desert or something. It's bullshit. Like I've done weekends that were tougher than what this guy went through. Like I'm not kidding. It's like this was like just pansy ass bullshit, and he's wanting me to believe like it's this great, like this great thing he did. Like he might have walked like 5 miles, and ran out of water, and that was like the end of the fucking world. Like,
what's interesting about the way the magical community responded to that was kind of interesting. It was. One of the thing that he got the most criticism for was the sacrificing the goat.
Yeah.
But yet no one gives Crowley shit for doing exactly the same thing.
Right.
So
did he eat it?
No, I don't think so.
You're not supposed to.
No. But so that was interesting to me. That showed me this kind of like, I was like, oh, okay, so you guys aren't willing to do the whole Crowley thing really then. You can give Crowley his due. He did actually... he did walk the walk when it came to that kind of stuff.
There's a long history of sacrifice in all kinds of religions.
Oh yeah, it's built into Tantra, so I mean, it's you can't avoid it. Yeah, it's interesting. Another thing though, this is another thing that's been really interesting because I keep an eye on conspiracy forums and all these weird chants and stuff. But the thing that seems to be picking up again at the moment is the Black Lodge, and I wondered if they've all just bought Alan Greenfield's book.
I was going to say which Black Lodge, like the big Black Lodge or the one that the Seder wrote about in Santa Cruz, because I knew those people.
Oh yeah, no, I mean the big Black Lodge.
Okay, the big Black Lodge. Okay,
yeah. So
because the little Black Lodge in Santa Cruz, again, that's something that got blown out of proportion. Like I was there when that went down, and it was just a bunch of people that got their hands on too much meth.
Yeah.
That's what happened. They just went completely fucking mad.
That'll get weird.
A couple of it got weird because they were all living together in this apartment, and they supposedly were an OTL lodge. They were
no bike survived that.
Yeah, they were exactly. They were a breakaway lodge from the Berkeley Lodge.
Okay.
Yeah. And it just got. I mean, like one of the people, actually, they were all smart people when it came to the occult, and one of the people is probably one of the most knowledgeable people on John Dee that I've ever met. But they got involved with the wrong drug, and they sat around all night snorting this shit, and then things got weird. So you go over there and knock on the door, and you'd hear like everybody scrambling, like inside the apartment, and then somebody would eventually come to the door, and they would put the chain on like open, like one eye, and wait for you to say something like, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole law." Like, dude, are you okay?
You need some air, buddy.
That document,
get some
that document's great, though.
It is. Yeah. The Black Lodge of Santa Cruz, but like, but it's all this like highfalutin things, and really, what was going on is like, people were overdrugged, people were sleeping with other people's lives, and people were getting jealous. That's what it was about. And everybody was paranoid about everything. Like you couldn't even go visit them.
Classic OTO then.
Very earth-based.
Yeah. It was classic OTO meets drug paranoia. So what was that that one the Philip K. Dick book that they made into a movie?
Scanner Darkly,
Scanner Darkly. It was like going over there was like going into the living room with Woody Harrelson and Robert Downey Jr. in that movie. Swear to God, that's what it was like.
Probably not as entertaining though.
No, not as entertaining, because you'd always get accused of something.
Right.
They're like, right before you came over, Joe, this was actually said to me. Right before you came over and knocked on the door, there was like this outflow of demons from this ritual we were doing, and then you knocked on the door. I'm like, and Well, it's apparently got something to do with you.
Right.
Oh, okay, sure. I'm like, didn't know I had that much power.
Right.
Yeah, but it is interesting to see the Black Lodge suddenly appearing. And I'm not talking about the Lynch Black Lodge necessarily.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the
Well, I mean, it all fits together, does it? The Lynch Black Lodge, Allen's Black Lodge, the Black Lodge of Santa Cruz. It's all like different franchises of the same thing. The Black Lodge energy.
yeah, but a lot. I need to read more about it. But who's the guy that wrote about the Black Lodge for Theosophy? I can't remember his name. I've got it written down somewhere.
Oh
like,
yeah,
it's like Lawrence or Laurent. What is it? Wait a minute, I've got it.
Leadbeater, was it him?
No, it wasn't Led. He might have mentioned it. It was Lorenzi. That's it, Lorenzi. This guy called Lorenzi.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the stuff that seems to be popping around at the
making
moment.
the rounds.
Yeah, so it's kind of like it's like the Theosophy version of the Black Lodge, which is obviously.
Can you give me some context on like why it's taken off, or like what they're vibing on? Or
it's almost like they seem to be saying that a lot of the stuff going on in the world right now, it's basically like the Illuminati story of old. Yeah, so it's kind of like, and that was one of the criticisms of Allen's book, that he's essentially written an Illuminati book, but called it the Black Lodge. But actually, it's not. If you read it, it's a bit more. It's not David Icke. It's a bit more kind of. It's got some history in it, for example. And he's he knows his stuff.
But it's the same old fucking Sith and Jedi story.
Yeah.
Basically,
but it is interesting how it mutates. Because what was it before the Illuminati? It was what were the Birches calling it? They didn't call it the Illuminati.
They called it the Illuminati, I think.
Did they called it the Illuminati as well?
That's where it came from. I think.
Yeah, that's where it came from.
Yeah.
None dares call Conspiracy, I think was the book.
Okay.
Okay. And then who was was Cooper was a big Illuminati guy.
And he was later, William Cooper. Yeah.
He was
all tied up on the Babylon working like.
What was it called? Mystery Babylon.
Mystery Babylon.
Yeah. I love those tapes. They're so.
I've never heard those.
Oh, they're on YouTube. They're brilliant.
They're amazing. They're amazing.
Yeah.
Like, I used to listen to him on shortwave.
Oh man,
that'd be fun.
Yeah, it's awesome.
My first ever conspiracy thing I ever read was on like Usenet or something. It was like some really early internet thing, and it was a BBS. It was this one where you had to dial in to somebody else's computer, and I found this file. It was just before the X-File started. I found this file that said something like UFO something or other, and it was his account of being on a submarine or something. And he saw.
Yeah. Do you remember what BBS?
God no, it would have been one here in the UK.
Oh, okay. Because I had a conspiracy BBS in the late '80s, and I had all that. I had all that stuff on there.
Yeah, it was great. I remember waiting 10 years for it to download, and then
exactly, yeah,
reading it, going, oh my god, it blew my mind.
Everybody was on dial-up, and like it took forever.
The glory days, as I like to call them.
Plus, as a BBS administrator, you had to throttle the downloads, or you have like 10 people downloading and everything would freeze.
Oh yeah, yeah. But I remember that's the first time you could ever live chat to someone as well. You could actually talk to someone, and
you could talk to somebody.
And then I remember I got into Telnet. Telnet was where it was at from occult stuff. Like
when you could Telnet off of you dial in and Telnet off to another place.
Yeah. There was, I can't remember the name of it. There was an occult Telnet server, and that's when I first started to get all the Crowley stuff. And it was full of like OTO members and Typhonians, and everyone got on. It was because I guess it was before everyone started arguing on the internet all the time.
Yeah,
which is what they do now.
And back then, like the major universities all had FTP servers.
Yeah.
And they didn't really, they didn't admin them at all. Like you could upload anything. Like there was like entire occult sections on some of those servers.
Yeah, the biggest one was. Do you remember Humboldt University one?
Yeah.
Mr. Bungle, one of the members of Mr. Bungle was there, and. I remember I was looking at one because he put a load of Mr. Bungle live recordings up on their FTP server. Right. And I found this other folder and I was like, what the fuck's this? And it was just full of occult stuff, absolutely full of it. And it was there for years and years. And it was really good stuff. It was like the best place to, if you couldn't find the books, then you'd go on the Humboldt server and it would always be updated. It was great. That was like Library of DOS. That's where you go now. Yeah. But it was like Library of DOS before Library of DOS. It was great. Yeah.
The old days.
The old days, the glory days. Before the internet went shit. We say talking on the internet.
Case in point.
Yeah. Oh dear.
Well, I think there was a period where it seemed like we mostly got along, but like there was a fewer people were on the internet. There was also almost like a intelligence barrier to entry. You had to be smart enough to put your computer online.
Yeah. Oh, one thing we should
know what to do
about.
when he did it.
One thing we should talk about, because I sort of put a little eulogy at the beginning of the last episode to him, but as you're from Chicago, you live in Chicago, we lost, I think, one of the most important subversive musicians of all time, Steve Albini.
Oh, yeah.
We should probably talk, we should acknowledge that, I think, because that's quite a big deal. Well, for me, it's a massive deal. He had a huge influence. I was in a band that was massively influenced by Shellac and and Big Black and stuff like that. So I don't know.
I know a bunch of people that were friends with him and that lived at the studio and helped build the studio, and everybody's, it's awful.
Yeah,
it's just awful, and I love Steve Albini, and Big Black and Shellac was a huge influence to me years and years ago, and I kind of I stayed aware of them, but I kind of forgot about how important he was until he died, and then kind of that just caused all these memories and experiences to flood back, and it's just hard to. I didn't remember, and I think it's hopefully everybody kind of does now, realizes how much of the musical world that we live in that he influenced, both aesthetically, but also politically and economically. He was for real punk rock, as much as that term gets watered down and thrown around and co-opted and leveraged. He was the real deal, and was up until the day he died. He used to do this thing here in Chicago every year, Letters to Santa.
Oh yeah.
That him and Heather started back in, I think, the late 90s or early 2000s, and they were doing it every year up until, I can't remember if they did it during COVID or not, but it was great. It was always a highlight of the year, where you would get just remarkable artists from all over the world because of their love for Albini mostly, but also because it was a charity event for kids here in Chicago that would come out and they would do 24-hour show. And I saw one time at 5 a.m, got to see Will Oldham and Sally Timms and John Langford perform Horses together. And that was just to me, that was, that was the bee's knees. But that kind of stuff happened every year at that thing, and because of him, because of his just untampable energy, and intellect. He was a very smart, very ethical, very kind human being.
And a poker player, real good poker player as well. He had they get wristbands, don't they? What's the thing? The bracelets. That's it. They get bracelets, don't they? And he had 2 bracelets, world champion bracelets. Which I thought was mad, but I think he would do that to make money to keep the studio open. Yeah. And I loved his ethics with if he'd record a big band or any band, I think most producers will forever take a kind of cut of the sale, and he refused to do that because it's like holding the band hostage. I think he said it's so I don't know. He had this. I've always had a very DIY kind of ethic.
He charged. I believe this is true. He charged the same amount of money for the Page and Plant record as he did for Robert Rolf Feddersen or for whoever, just some obscure local band that nobody knows of. He charged the same amount of money for his services and never took points.
I love it. We used to have an event here in the UK called All Tomorrow's Parties. It was like this.
You love that,
yeah. It was like a 3-day festival, I guess, but it was in we have these things like holiday camps, they're called, where you, instead of staying in the hotel, everyone stays in these kind of chalets. And it's a real cheap holiday in the UK, but they tend to have great big music halls in them and stuff, and So these clever guys thought this would be perfect for a music festival, and then so all the bands and all the punters would all be in the same, just milling around. It was great. It was a real good thing. And I remember when Shellac, they'd get a band to curate it each year, and Shellac curated it one year, and yeah, they came on first in the smallest venue every day to get everyone out of bed, so that they'd watch the rest of the bands. I thought that's such a cool thing to do. It was so weird. You'd wake up quite groggy in the morning, hungover or whatever, and you got right off to see Shellac. It's the strangest thing, but it worked so well. But yeah, no, I mean, yeah, a legend as far as I'm concerned. Like,
absolutely,
and well worth
deserved every bit of it. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
R.I.P.
Yep.